There's a video circulating right now that has the entire NFL world doing a double take. Not a highlight reel, not a press conference clip, not some analyst screaming into a camera about quarterback ratings. Raw, unfiltered, zero production value training footage of Shedeur Sanders moving in a way that almost nobody expected to see from a pocket passer fighting for his starting job. And the second this footage hit the internet, every Browns-related comment section on the planet went completely sideways. Because what people saw was not a quarterback throwing perfect spirals to wide-open receivers, while a videographer slaps dramatic music over it to make it look legendary. What they saw was a young man doing sprint mechanics, resistance band work, and first-step explosion drills at a level you would expect from a track athlete or an NFL cornerback, not a quarterback. Drop a fire emoji in the comments right now if you think Shedeur Sanders is the one of the QB1 for Cleveland. Do not overthink it. Just go with your gut before we get into everything. Because by the time we are done here at Gridiron Ground, at least a few of you are going to feel very differently about this situation than you do right now. The evidence has been stacking up quietly, and today we are pulling all of it into the light.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Something about this training clip separated it immediately from the flood of off-season quarterback content that gets posted every summer and forgotten within 48 hours. You have seen that content before. A quarterback in a fitted hat throwing routes on air to receivers running against imaginary defenders while someone films it in slow motion with a filter on it. It looks good. It means almost nothing. Teams post it. Fans repost it. Analysts pretend it tells them something. It does not. This footage was different the moment it appeared on screen. There was no slow motion. There was no filter. There was no production team trying to make anything look more impressive than it actually was. What you were looking at was a raw training environment, the kind of unglamorous, repetition-heavy, no audience work that only gets done by athletes who are genuinely trying to change something about themselves rather than manage a public image. The drills themselves are what made people stop scrolling. Sprint mechanics from a standing start, which is the kind of foundational speed work that sprinters and skill position players do to improve the very first step off the line. Not the second step. Not the stride pattern 5 yards into a route. The initial explosion out of a static position. That split second of pure first step power that separates athletes who are fast from athletes who are sudden. Then came the resistance band work. And the specific focus of those bands matters more than most casual observers recognized when they first watched the clip. The bands were positioned to target hip drive and posterior chain activation, which is the precise muscle group that generates explosive lateral movement, pocket escapability, and the ability to reset your feet faster than a pass rusher can adjust his angle. These are not general fitness exercises. These are targeted athletic development drills with a very specific purpose that maps directly onto what a quarterback needs in the modern NFL. The lateral explosion work was the third element and arguably the most revealing. Directional change drills that prioritize the suddenness of the cut rather than the top-end speed of the movement. Because in a collapsing pocket, a quarterback does not need to run 40 yards in a straight line. He needs to move 3 yards left or 2 yards right in a fraction of a second to buy enough time to reset and deliver the ball accurately. That is a specific athletic skill. It is trainable. And Shedeur Sanders apparently spent his entire offseason training it. Here is what made the comment sections explode. This is not the kind of work you do when you are comfortable with your situation. This is not the kind of work you do when you believe the starting job is already yours and the competition is a formality. This is the kind of work you do when you have watched your own film, identified the specific physical limitations that cost you plays last season, and decided that the only acceptable response is to become a genuinely different athlete before anyone gets the chance to evaluate you again. That level of self-awareness combined with that level of dedication to addressing it is not something you can fake on a training field. The drills are either being done or they are not. The resistance is either real or it is not. The competitive intensity in that environment is either present or it is absent. And every person who watched that footage came away saying the same thing without being prompted. That looks real. Stay with Gridiron Ground because what this footage was actually responding to, the specific situation Shedeur was dropped into as a rookie, is the part of this story that almost nobody covered honestly. And it changes everything about how you interpret those numbers critics keep throwing around. To understand why those specific drills matter at a level beyond the surface, you have to understand what the quarterback position in the modern NFL actually demands from the people playing it. Because the job description has changed so dramatically over the last decade that the quarterback of 2025 and the quarterback of 2005 are almost playing two different positions that happen to share a name. 20 years ago, the ideal quarterback profile was built around a relatively simple set of requirements. Stand in the pocket, go through your reads in a logical sequence, deliver the ball on time to the open receiver, avoid taking unnecessary sacks, and protect the football. Athletic ability was a bonus. Mobility was appreciated when it existed, but was never treated as essential. The great quarterbacks of that era were mostly statuesque pocket passers who won with timing, accuracy, and football intelligence, rather than with their legs or their first step quickness. That model is not dead, but it is no longer sufficient on its own in a league where defenses have evolved specifically to destroy it. Pass rushes are faster, more coordinated, and more creatively schemed than at any point in NFL history. Defensive coordinators are disguising coverages and rotating between looks at a rate that makes pre-snap reads less reliable than they used to be. Blocking schemes break down more regularly because the athletes attacking them are better and more numerous than the system was designed to handle.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
The quarterbacks who are winning championships right now share a common thread that goes beyond arm talent. They can feel pressure before it physically arrives. They can move their feet faster than the defense can adjust to where they have relocated in the pocket. They can extend plays that should have ended as sacks into completions that move the chains. Patrick Mahomes does not win 3 Super Bowls without that ability. Josh Allen does not transform from a project into a perennial MVP candidate without developing it. Lamar Jackson built his entire identity around it. This is the context in which Shedeur Sanders watched his own rookie film this offseason. And what he saw in that film was a version of himself that was physically capable, but not yet explosive enough to consistently execute the pocket movement and play extension that separates good quarterbacks from ones who get their teams into the playoffs. He saw moments where a tenth of a second more of first step suddenness would have moved him out of a collapsing pocket before the sack landed. He saw moments where better lateral quickness would have reset his platform enough to deliver an accurate throw on a play that instead became an incompletion or a scramble for minimal gain. He saw the gap between who he was and who he needed to be, and instead of waiting for someone to fix it for him, he found the training environment and the specific work that addresses it directly. That is not a small thing. Most young players see their own weaknesses in the film and find ways to rationalize them or attribute them to external factors. The great ones see those weaknesses and treat them as a problem with a solution that requires personal accountability to find. What the training footage showed the NFL world was a quarterback doing exactly the kind of work that elite players do when nobody is watching. The kind of work that shows up not as a single spectacular play, but as a cumulative improvement across dozens of plays per game, where slightly more explosiveness and slightly more pocket mobility quietly changes outcomes that never make the highlight reel, but absolutely show up in the final score. And the timing of all of this matters enormously. Because what Shedeur was dealing with last season was not a situation that gave anyone a fair read on what he is actually capable of. That story deserves its own full breakdown, and Gridiron Ground is going to give it one right now. Let us be honest about something that has been glossed over repeatedly in the coverage of this quarterback competition. What Shedeur Sanders experienced during his first professional season was not just difficult in the ordinary sense of the word rookie difficulty. It was a specific and measurable structural failure that surrounded him on a snap-by-snap basis and made nearly every aspect of playing quarterback harder than it should have been for anyone at any experience level. The Cleveland offensive line last season was not underperforming. It was collapsing. There is a meaningful difference between those two descriptions, and the distinction matters enormously when you are trying to evaluate what a quarterback's performance actually tells you about his talent and ceiling. An underperforming offensive line gives up pressure inconsistently. It has good games and bad games. It creates pockets that are occasionally compromised, but that allow a quarterback to function and execute on a reasonable percentage of passing plays. A collapsing offensive line is something categorically different. It is a unit where multiple positions are failing simultaneously, where the problems are not situational but structural, where a quarterback cannot trust the protection on any given snap and must operate with the constant awareness that his pocket is likely to disintegrate before his roots have time to develop. That second description is what Shedeur was working behind last season. 5 of the 6 players who took the most snaps on that line are gone now, which tells you everything you need to know about how the front office assessed that situation in hindsight. When an organization removes that many pieces of a single position group in a single offseason, they are not making adjustments. They are acknowledging a catastrophic failure. Now let us talk about the stat that critics have been using as their primary weapon against Shedeur since the end of last season: completion percentage over expectation. The number that analysts wave around as proof that his accuracy issues are fundamental rather than situational. The number that shows up in every Watson versus Shedeur debate as the conversation-ending argument for why the rookie is not ready. That number was bad. Sitting with that honesty is important because pretending it was not bad would undermine everything else being said here. It was genuinely low, near the bottom of the league on throws at or beyond the line of scrimmage. That is the fact as it exists. But here is what that number actually captures when you strip away the narrative and examine the raw context. It captures a rookie quarterback who was operating behind pass protection that was actively failing him on a consistent basis, throwing to a receiver room that did not contain a single proven difference maker capable of creating separation against legitimate coverage, trying to execute a sophisticated offensive system with essentially zero margin for error, because the structural support that makes any offense function was collapsing around him. Now here is the exercise that every analyst reaching for that CPOE number should be required to do before presenting it as a verdict on Shedeur's talent. Go find the rookie year numbers for the quarterbacks currently considered elite in this league. Go pull up what their advanced metrics looked like when they were learning the position behind imperfect rosters with systems they had not fully mastered yet. The numbers are almost universally ugly, not because those players were not talented, not because they were not going to become the players they eventually became, but because year one in the NFL is genuinely hard under any circumstances, and it becomes exponentially harder when the offensive infrastructure surrounding you is functionally broken. Gridiron Ground is built on giving you the complete picture rather than the convenient one. Subscribe right now if that is the kind of analysis you want throughout this entire Browns quarterback situation, because every update between now and week 1 is going to be covered the same way, with full context and zero shortcuts. Shedeur's rookie numbers are a photograph of a bad situation. They are not a prophecy about who he is as a passer when the circumstances change. and the circumstances are about to change in a way that is far more dramatic than most people have fully absorbed yet. There is a version of this offseason story where the Cleveland Browns looked at their quarterback situation, made a few modest upgrades around the edges, and essentially told both quarterbacks to figure it out with mostly the same supporting cast. That version of events would tell you something specific and somewhat concerning about how the front office actually views this competition. That is not what happened. What happened is something significantly more aggressive and significantly more revealing about where the organization's genuine priorities are pointed. 5 of the 6 players who logged the most snaps on Cleveland's offensive line last season are no longer on the roster, not moved to depth roles, not restructured into backup positions. Gone. Veterans with years of experience, players who had made Pro Bowls at various stages of their careers, all of them either released outright, traded away, or allowed to walk when free agency opened. The level of turnover at a single position group tells you something unambiguous. This was not a renovation.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
This was a demolition, followed by a reconstruction from the foundation up. The additions the Browns made to replace those departures are not budget solutions. They are not veteran minimum signings and tryout players hoping someone surprises. They are legitimate, high-investment, starter-caliber players who cost real money and real draft capital to acquire. They traded for a starting-caliber right tackle who has built his career as a technically disciplined, reliable pass protector. The kind of lineman who will not show up in a highlight reel because he does not give up the uncontested speed rushes that become sack videos. In free agency, they committed tens of millions in guaranteed money for a guard who profiles as one of the most athletically gifted players at his position in the entire league. We are talking about a player with the lateral quickness and movement skills that offensive line coaches covet, because they translate directly into both pass protection versatility and run game success. The interior of the line was upgraded further with a veteran who has played at a Pro Bowl level before. A player brought in specifically because Todd Monken wanted experience and leadership anchoring the middle of that rebuilt unit. Someone who has done this before under pressure and knows how to make the players around him better. And then came the moment that made the front office's intentions unmistakable. With one of their 2 first-round picks this draft cycle, Cleveland selected an offensive tackle out of a major program who was essentially untouchable during his final college season. 0 sacks allowed. 0. Not one time did a pass rusher get through him cleanly enough to touch the quarterback across an entire college season. He walked away with the most prestigious individual award given to offensive linemen in the sport. A player of that caliber, drafted with that high of a selection, sends a message that cannot be misread. This franchise is building a protected environment at the quarterback position and investing at the very top of the draft to do it. They doubled back later in the draft to add more offensive line depth, a tackle, a center, real competition at every spot along the front 5. The receiver room went through its own significant transformation. Cleveland added proven pass-catching talent in free agency alongside the tight end who broke out last season as one of the few genuine bright spots on the roster. They drafted rookie receivers with legitimate speed and the ability to create separation at the professional level. Players who will force defensive coordinators to actually scheme around them, instead of ignoring them, the way opposing defenses could largely ignore Cleveland's perimeter last year. This is the part of the story that every analyst using Shedeur's rookie CPOE number as a conversation ender needs to sit with quietly for a moment. Organizations do not spend first-round picks and tens of millions in guaranteed money to create a fortress around a quarterback they have already decided to replace. Front offices do not rebuild an entire position group from scratch to give a veteran coming off double Achilles surgery the best possible environment to recapture a version of himself from years ago in a different city. The investment is the most honest communication this franchise has made all offseason, and it is pointing in one direction loudly enough that pretending otherwise requires a deliberate choice to look away. Fairness requires acknowledging the full picture here, because anyone who pretends the other side of this argument does not exist is not doing honest analysis. They are doing advocacy, and Gridiron Ground does not do advocacy. So let us talk about Deshaun Watson with the same directness we have applied to everything else. At his absolute peak, Deshaun Watson was one of the most thrilling and complete dual-threat quarterbacks this league had produced in the modern era. What he did in Houston, particularly during the stretch of football before things fell apart organizationally, was legitimately special. Not almost special, not kind of impressive, genuinely elite in the ways that make defensive coordinators stay up on Saturday nights before they face you. The arm talent was real. The ability to feel pressure before it physically arrived was real. The improvisational quality that allowed him to keep his eyes downfield while his legs bought extra seconds was real. The accuracy he could maintain while throwing from non-traditional platforms and from outside the pocket was real. Nobody who watched him during that period in Houston can look at those performances honestly and say they were not watching a top-tier NFL quarterback doing things that only a handful of players can do. If you were ranking the most gifted quarterbacks in football based purely on peak performance history, Watson would belong on that list without significant debate. That part of the conversation deserves acknowledgement. But that peak was not recent. That peak was not in Cleveland. And between that peak and the present moment sits a series of events that have fundamentally changed what Watson represents as a football player, and what betting on his return actually requires an organization to ignore. Start with the contract, because the financial reality of this situation cannot be avoided in any honest conversation. Watson signed a fully guaranteed deal worth $230 million, every dollar of it guaranteed at signing. Cleveland also surrendered 3 first-round picks to acquire him from Houston, meaning the total cost when you factor in the draft capital spent reshaped this franchise's trajectory for years in ways that are still being felt. That contract was supposed to end the search. It was supposed to be the move that put Cleveland in legitimate championship contention. It was supposed to change everything. Since arriving in Cleveland, Watson has appeared in 19 games across multiple seasons. 19 total games spread across what has now become several years of suspension, injury, and absence. He suffered a torn Achilles on his right leg. He rehabilitated it through the grueling process that torn Achilles recoveries require. He came back. And then he tore the same Achilles on the same leg again, required a second surgical procedure, and missed the entirety of last season working through another lengthy recovery. A torn Achilles is already widely considered one of the most demanding injuries for any athlete to fully come back from. For a mobile quarterback specifically, one whose value is tied not just to arm talent, but to the ability to move, extend plays, and threaten defenses with the possibility of a scramble, a torn Achilles on the primary drive leg is potentially career-altering. To tear it twice on the same leg is the kind of injury history that forces even the most optimistic evaluator to ask hard questions about whether the player who returns is physically capable of being the player who existed before the injuries started accumulating.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
There were also the off-field circumstances that created a suspension and organizational distraction during the early portion of his Cleveland tenure. Numerous civil matters surfaced. An NFL investigation led to an extended absence that cost him time, cost him reps, cost him the continuity that quarterbacks need to develop rhythm with teammates and systems. Those details have been covered extensively elsewhere. But their impact on Watson's ability to simply play football consistently in Cleveland was real and measurable regardless of how any individual chooses to frame the broader conversation. The version of Deshaun Watson that Cleveland paid $230 million for was the Houston version. The version defenses genuinely feared. That version and the version currently trying to prove his legs still work after double Achilles reconstruction are separated by years, surgeries, absences, and a production record in Cleveland that never matched what the investment was supposed to deliver even before the injuries made everything worse. Pretending those two versions are the same player is not optimism. It is a choice to ignore what the evidence is showing. The internal voices from inside an organization are always more revealing than the media narratives built around them, because reporters can only report what their sources tell them, and sources have agendas. Coaches who work with players every single day in film rooms and on practice fields, and in the unglamorous detail work that never gets filmed for social media, have a different kind of knowledge. And when coaches start saying specific things in specific language without being prompted, it is worth paying very close attention. Shedeur Sanders' own position coach, the man whose entire professional responsibility is to evaluate and develop this quarterback on a daily basis, reportedly spoke openly about being genuinely blown away by how much Shedeur's understanding of the field has evolved since last season. And the critical detail about that statement is the context in which it was delivered. This was not a prepared media day answer. This was not a coach saying nice things about all his players because the camera is rolling, and it is the professional thing to do. This was a position coach speaking candidly about what he is observing in real time, in the meeting room, on the practice field, in the film sessions where a quarterback either sees what is in front of him quickly enough to make the right decision or he does not. He described growth in processing speed. He talked about Shedeur diagnosing defensive coverages from the line of scrimmage in ways that simply were not present last year. He referenced an improved ability to see pass protection schemes developing before the snap, rather than reacting to them after. Those are not cosmetic improvements. Those are foundational quarterback skills that separate players who survive in the NFL from players who thrive in it. Hearing that they have developed to a noticeable degree in a single offseason is the kind of thing that should make everyone following this story pay closer attention to who is actually trending in which direction. Todd Monken was even more direct in his public comments. When asked about Shedeur's development heading into training camp, Monken did not give one of those carefully constructed non-answers that coaches use when they want to avoid creating controversy. He did not say something vague about all his guys working hard and everyone improving and the competition being good for the team. He spoke specifically. He referenced growth that he first noticed as far back as January and February, growth that carried consistently through organized team activities in May. And then he used a word that head coaches almost never volunteer publicly about their players when cameras are present. He called it phenomenal, his word, not a paraphrase, not a reporter's generous interpretation of a lukewarm comment. The man who runs the building, who sets the culture, who makes the final roster decision, looked into a microphone and described his young quarterback's development as phenomenal without anyone asking him to put a positive spin on anything. Coaches choose their words around reporters carefully. They know every word gets clipped and replayed and analyzed and put into headlines. The fact that Monken chose that specific word without prompting tells you something real about what he is actually seeing behind closed doors. ESPN's Field Yates, one of the more credible and plugged-in voices covering the league as a whole, called this the truest quarterback competition in the entire NFL this offseason. Not one of the most interesting, not one of the more compelling storylines. The truest, meaning the one where the outcome is least predetermined by factors outside of actual performance. His reasoning was sharp. Most teams default to the experienced veteran even when a younger player outperforms him in camp, because it is the politically safer move. Cleveland, Yates argued, does not appear to have that kind of wiggle room, and importantly does not seem to want it. A rookie receiver on the Browns roster was asked directly about the competition and chose honesty over politics. He described it as fascinating to watch and said he genuinely had no idea how it was going to resolve. That is not the language of someone who sees a foregone conclusion playing out every day. That is someone watching a real competition with no predetermined winner. Gridiron Ground will be right here covering every development as this situation evolves through training camp. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because the next chapter of this story is coming fast. Here is the part of this analysis that has been almost completely missing from the public conversation around this competition, and it might be the single most important structural factor in determining how this thing resolves. The timeline, the evaluation window, the specific architecture of when and how Todd Monken is going to make this decision. Because when you look closely at the details of that structure, something becomes visible that changes the entire framing of who this competition is actually designed to favor. Reports from credible sources covering the Browns indicate that this competition is not going to be resolved in the first week of training camp. It is not going to be resolved after a few days of padded practice. It is not going to be resolved in a quarterback meeting where Monken makes a quiet call and the roster moves follow. The expectation from multiple well-sourced reporters is that Monken intends to run this evaluation deep into training camp and extend it through at least the first 2 preseason games before committing to a Week 1 starter. Think about what that specific structure reveals. A coach who had already privately made his decision about this competition would have zero incentive to extend the evaluation into preseason games. There is no organizational benefit to dragging out a settled question into exhibition football. Preseason games create injury risk for both players. They create media pressure where every incompletion gets dissected and every interception becomes a 3-day news cycle. A coach managing perceptions and going through the motions of a competition would have found a politically smooth way to signal the answer through camp performance and moved on quietly. Monken is not doing that. He wants live game snaps against real defenses, running real defensive schemes before he commits to anything. He wants to see who handles an actual opposing defensive coordinator trying to confuse them with disguised coverages and creative pressure packages. He wants to see who processes information quickly enough under real conditions. He wants to see who delivers the ball accurately when an actual pass rusher is generating actual push, and the margin for error is as small as it gets. That requirement for live game evidence is an acknowledgement that non-contact organized team activities and even padded camp sessions do not fully answer the question he needs answered. Only real football can do that. And here is where the timeline creates fundamentally different conditions for each candidate. Watson's central question mark in this competition is not arm talent. It is not football intelligence. It is not familiarity with the system. Watson's question mark is physical durability under live contact after reconstructive surgery on the same Achilles tendon twice in the same leg. That question does not get answered in shorts. It does not get answered in shells. It does not get answered in walkthroughs or 7-on-7 periods or any non-contact environment. It only gets answered when Watson has to move laterally at full speed, plant his drive foot hard on a scramble, or absorb contact from a pass rusher who broke through the line cleanly. Every additional week of padded practice and every additional preseason snap is another opportunity for that specific and significant question to be tested under increasingly realistic conditions. The answer to that question can only go one of 2 ways. Either Watson demonstrates that his body has recovered fully enough to handle those physical demands consistently, which would be genuinely impressive and would substantially help his case, or something in the evaluation reveals limits to that recovery that the medical staff already knows exist even if they have not said so publicly. And the longer the physical evaluation runs, the more times that question gets asked under conditions that carry real consequences. Gridiron Ground has been tracking this story from the beginning, and the subscribe button keeps you updated on every development that matters. Hit it right now because the preseason is coming, and the answers are going to arrive faster than anyone expects. Shedeur's question marks are completely different in nature. They are about whether the growth his coaches are describing is real and sustainable under increasing competitive pressure. Every additional week of competition and every additional preseason rep is another opportunity for him to add evidence supporting what his coaches are already saying. Time is not a neutral variable in this evaluation. It is actively working in one direction. Ever since it became clear that both Watson and Shedeur were entering a genuine competition for the starting job, chatter began circulating in league circles about the possibility of Cleveland trading Shedeur if Watson emerged as the decisive winner. The logic as presented by various media voices was straightforward enough. A young quarterback with Shedeur's college pedigree and natural talent would command real value on the trade market, and teams desperate for quarterback solutions would presumably line up to acquire someone with his profile. The story writes itself on paper, except it keeps running into a wall every time someone with actual access to the situation addresses it directly. Multiple credible league insiders have explicitly pumped the brakes on the trade narrative, and they have done so consistently enough across different outlets that it is difficult to dismiss as coordinated spin. The expectation from the most plugged-in voices covering this story is that both quarterbacks are expected to be on the Cleveland roster when the regular season begins in September. Not one of them, both. That framing, coming repeatedly from reporters who have clearly spoken to people with genuine knowledge of the front office's thinking, suggests that Cleveland either has not made a firm decision about the competition outcome yet, or has made a decision that involves keeping both players regardless of who wins the starting role. Neither of those scenarios is consistent with the idea that Shedeur is about to be packaged and shipped somewhere else the moment Watson has a strong week of practices. There is a caveat worth acknowledging because intellectual honesty requires it. Some reporting has suggested that while Cleveland's baseline plan is to keep both quarterbacks, the front office would not automatically close the door on a trade if the offer was compelling enough, and Watson had emerged as the clearly decisive winner of the competition. One insider used language to the effect that every organization has a price, meaning a sufficiently substantial offer would at least receive consideration. But having a price and actively shopping something are two categorically different things. The fact that the trade conversation has been largely dismissed by the people closest to the situation tells you that whatever is being decided internally, it does not currently look like a plan that involves moving the young quarterback regardless of how the competition resolves. The locker room temperature is harder to measure objectively, but equally important to read accurately. And the honest signal from what has come out publicly is that there is no clear internal favorite. The rookie receiver's description of the competition as fascinating and genuinely uncertain is probably the most transparent window anyone outside the organization has been given into what the daily reality of this situation actually feels like. This is a player who sees both quarterbacks every single day with no political angle to push and no agenda to advance. And when a player in that position describes the outcome as legitimately unclear, that testimony carries more weight than a dozen anonymous insider reports from sources with varying degrees of motivation. Now let us zoom out for a moment and address the emotional weight that surrounds all of this. Because the Cleveland Browns have been searching for stability at the quarterback position for longer than many of their current fans have been alive. The list of names is long enough and painful enough that Browns fans have developed a collective wariness about off-season optimism. The former top picks who flashed but could not sustain it. The veteran stopgaps. The blockbuster acquisitions that were supposed to change everything, and instead added another painful chapter to a story nobody in Cleveland wanted to keep reading. The Watson acquisition was the biggest swing in franchise history. 3 first-round picks and $230 million fully guaranteed dollars. It did not deliver what it was supposed to deliver. And now the franchise stands at a crossroads that feels different than the previous ones because the choice is cleaner. Not between two uncertain options. Between a veteran chasing a version of himself from years and 2 surgeries ago, and a young player who is actively, measurably, coach-verifiably growing with one of the most significantly upgraded rosters, this franchise has assembled around a quarterback in decades. Whether the people making the decision have the courage to follow where the evidence is pointing without flinching from the contract size and the sunk cost, that is the real question. And the answer is coming very soon. Stack everything we have covered today side by side, and the picture that emerges is not ambiguous. It does not split evenly. It leans clearly and consistently in one direction. Shedeur Sanders spent this offseason doing targeted elite-level speed and explosion work that directly addresses the specific physical limitations exposed during his rookie year. He is younger, healthier, and demonstrably improving. His position coach is using language that goes well beyond polite encouragement. His head coach called his development phenomenal without anyone asking him to say anything generous. The roster surrounding him has been rebuilt from the ground up at a cost that organizations do not pay for quarterbacks. They have already written off. On the other side, Deshaun Watson has played 19 games in Cleveland across multiple seasons. He tore the same Achilles twice. His production here never matched the contract. His best football happened years ago in a different city with a different supporting cast. His primary question mark is physical durability under live contact, and that question gets tested harder with every additional week of evaluation. The prediction is Shedeur Sanders starting Week 1 for the Cleveland Browns, not because the underdog story is more appealing, not because youth always beats experience, because when you follow the evidence honestly without letting noise or narrative cloud the picture, it all points in the same direction. Now go back to the comment you dropped at the beginning of this video. The football emoji you left before any of this information was in front of you. Does it still represent how you feel? Did something shift? Drop your updated take right now because that conversation is the one worth having. Gridiron Ground will be here covering every single development from the first padded practice through the final preseason snap and everything beyond it. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because this story is only getting started, and you do not want to be the last one to know when it breaks.